When one thinks of medieval Europe, images come to mind. Knights in shining armor, mounted on tall steeds, charging into battle with lances, or humbly paying courtly respects to noble ladies in palaces. Knights, this legendary group that spanned nearly 9 centuries of European medieval history, were not only elite forces on the battlefield, but also the core link in the social structure and bearers of cultural spirit. They were the paladins who expanded territories under Charlemagne, the noble warriors who fought bloody battles in the Hundred Years' War, the fervent religious believers in the Crusades, and the loyal protagonists of love in romantic literature. Today, we will comprehensively and systematically unveil the mysterious veil of knights, from the origins of the system to their daily lives, from chivalry to historical impact, restoring the true face of this legendary group. In the year 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire collapsed under the onslaught of Germanic barbarians, and European history entered the long medieval period. The Germanic people destroyed the slave-based civilization of Rome and gradually established a feudal system centered on land on these ruins. Unlike the Romans, who relied on heavy infantry, the Germanic peoples were natural cavalry enthusiasts. They grew up on horseback from a young age, skilled in mounted archery and charges. It was precisely with their formidable cavalry that they swept through Roman legions and conquered the Western European continent. Charlemagne, later hailed as the father of Europe, took the role of cavalry to its extreme. Legend has it that his 12 paladins were brave and skilled in battle, making significant contributions to the establishment of the Carolingian Empire. These paladins were not only military elites, but also Charlemagne's confidants and allies. They obtained land and privileges by swearing allegiance and repaid their monarch with military service. This land for military service model became the prototype of the knightly system. As the feudal system continued to develop, the rights and obligations between lords and vassals became increasingly clear. Major feudal lords granted land to minor nobles, who then became vassals of the lords and were required to provide cavalry forces for the lords during wartime. The equipment for cavalry, war horses, armor, and weapons, was extremely costly. In the 9th century, the price of a fine war horse was equivalent to 6 oxen, and the cost of a suit of chainmail was comparable to that of a war horse. Adding weapons such as spears, longswords, and shields, the expense of a full set of equipment was enough to bankrupt an ordinary family. Therefore, only minor nobles with a certain amount of land and wealth could afford the cost of becoming a cavalryman. To ensure the stability of military forces, feudal lords began to standardize and professionalize these well-equipped cavalrymen, giving rise to the formal establishment of the knightly system. When a person was knighted, they were typically granted a fief, feudal estate, becoming a minor feudal lord. The produce from this fief was sufficient to support the knight and their family, freeing them from agricultural labor and allowing them to devote themselves fully to military training and warfare. Of course, the fief was not granted without obligation. The knight had to fulfill their duties to the lord, accompanying the lord to war, providing protection and participating in castle defense during peacetime, and even offering financial support when the lord required it. However, not all knights could obtain fiefs. Some individuals of lower birth but exceptional martial skill might be hired by lords as household knights, receiving only wages without fixed land grants. Others served directly at court, becoming personal guards for kings or great nobles, living on the monarch's patronage. Regardless of whether they held land, the core identity of a knight was that of a professional warrior who lived by the sword. They were the upholders of feudal order and the core force of the medieval military system. The emergence of the knightly institution not only met the military needs of feudal lords, but also constructed a rigorous social hierarchy. In medieval Europe, society was divided into three estates: those who prayed, the clergy; those who fought, the nobility, with knights belonging to the lower tier of this class; and those who worked, the peasants. As part of the fighting class, knights bore the responsibility of defending territories and maintaining order, while also enjoying corresponding privileges. They were exempt from taxes, could exercise judicial authority on their own fiefs, and even had the right to manage serfs. This model of reciprocal rights and obligations formed the cornerstone of the medieval feudal system. Becoming a knight was by no means easy. It required not only substantial financial resources, but also strict criteria regarding lineage, character, and faith. In medieval Europe, knighthood was a composite of status, privilege, and honor. For commoners to ascend into this class was as difficult as climbing to the heavens. As mentioned earlier, the cost of a knight's equipment and training was exorbitant, far beyond the means of ordinary peasants or artisans. Therefore, candidates for knighthood almost exclusively came from noble families. Typically the eldest sons; younger sons might become clergy or seek other paths. From birth, these noble youths were destined for the knightly path. Their families would expend all resources to provide them with war horses, armor, weapons, and hire professional trainers for their instruction. However, there were rare instances of exceptional ennoblement. Some soldiers of humble origin, having demonstrated extraordinary bravery, loyalty, or achieved great military feats on the battlefield, might be knighted by a lord or king. For example, during the 100 Years' War, many commoner archers were granted knighthood for their outstanding service. Yet such cases were extremely rare, and the vast majority of knights still hailed from the noble class. Beyond family background, personal wealth accumulation is also crucial. A knight must not only equip himself but also hire squires, typically young nobles who manage the knight's horses, polish armor, carry weapons, and learn combat skills under the knight's guidance. Additionally, knights must maintain certain social expenses, participating in tournaments, court banquets, and other activities, all of which require substantial financial support. Thus, possessing sufficient wealth is a necessary condition for becoming a knight and maintaining that status. If lineage and wealth are the hardware of knighthood, then character and faith are the software, representing the core values of a knight's identity. The Book of the Order of Chivalry, written in the 13th century, outlines detailed requirements for a knight's character. A knight must be absolutely loyal to the lord or king he serves, courageous and unwavering on the battlefield. He must emulate ancient heroes, pursue a noble way of life, avoid arrogance, laziness, or lust, and never swear false oaths or deceive others. He must adhere to the Christian faith, defend it against heretics, and protect the church and the weak. Candidates must have no criminal record or unethical behavior, or they will be disqualified from becoming knights. These character requirements form the foundation of chivalry. In the social context of the Middle Ages, knights were not only warriors but also men of noble character, whose conduct served as a model for society and earned the admiration of ordinary people. The training of a knight is a long and rigorous process, typically beginning at 7 years old and culminating in knighthood around 21 years old, spanning over a decade. Before the age of 7, noble children receive education from their mothers at home, learning basic etiquette, religious knowledge, and moral principles. After 7 years old, they are sent to the castle of their father's lord or another great noble to become pages. The main duties of a page include serving nobles and their families, learning foundational skills such as horseback riding, archery, and wrestling, while also reading religious texts, studying Latin, and receiving moral education. Around the age of 14, pages are promoted to squires, where they begin systematic military training. They accompany knights into battle or on hunts, learning to wield weapons like lances, longswords, and shields, and practicing mounted combat techniques. Additionally, squires must learn how to care for war horses, repair armor, dress wounds, and even study basic strategies and tactics. During this stage, squires hone their willpower and martial skills through continuous training and practice, preparing to become true knights. The age for knighthood typically ranges from 15 to 25 years old, depending on the candidate's martial prowess, character, and family background. Once a candidate meets the standards for knighthood, a grand knighting ceremony is held, officially conferring the title of knight. The knighting ceremony, also known as the dubbing ceremony, was one of the most solemn ceremonies in medieval Europe. It was not only a recognition of the candidate's martial skills and character, but also a sacred religious ritual, symbolizing the candidate's transformation from an ordinary person to a knight. The ceremony was typically held in a church, and the candidate needed to make thorough preparations in advance. On the day before the ceremony, the candidate would undergo bathing and changing of clothes, an act that symbolized purification of the soul in the Middle Ages, signifying the washing away of past blemishes and embracing the new identity with a pure body and mind. Subsequently, the candidate would present their armor and weapons on the church altar, praying to the gods for divine protection. That night, the candidate would spend the entire evening in confession at the church. They needed to confess their past wrongdoings to the priest, expressing their determination to uphold virtue, pledge loyalty to their Lord, and defend the faith after becoming a knight. The priest would provide religious guidance, admonishing them about the responsibilities and duties of a knight, and encouraging them to become a noble and courageous knight. On the morning of the second day, the knighting ceremony officially began. First, a priest conducted a mass to bless the candidate and consecrate the armor and weapons on the altar, imbuing them with sacred power. After the mass, the candidate, dressed in a white robe symbolizing purity, knelt before the altar to receive the knighthood from the officiant. The officiant was usually the candidate's lord, king, bishop, or pope. Most candidates chose someone of high status as the officiant, as it was considered an honor. The officiant would hang the consecrated sword on the candidate's waist, then draw their own sword and gently tap the candidate's shoulders 3 times, sometimes once, with the flat of the blade while reciting the knight's oath. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I dub thee a knight. May you be brave, loyal, and righteous, defending the faith, protecting the weak, and upholding honor. These 3 taps held different meanings. The first symbolized courage, the second loyalty, and the third righteousness. After completing this ritual, the candidate officially became a knight. He would rise, don his armor, put on his helmet, take up his spear and shield, and receive congratulations from all present. Following the knighting ceremony, a series of celebratory activities usually took place. The new knight would mount his war horse and parade around the castle or church, displaying his armor and weapons while receiving cheers and blessings from the people. Additionally, the new knight would engage in friendly jousts with other knights to showcase his martial skills and prove himself worthy of the title of knight. The knighting ceremony was not only a personal honor, but also a source of pride for the family. The candidate's family, friends, and serfs from the fief would attend to witness the ceremony and bless the new knight. Kings and great nobles were also keen on holding knighting ceremonies for young nobles, as it was an important means of winning hearts and consolidating feudal rule. Through the knighting of knights, the bond between lord and vassal was strengthened, and feudal order was further maintained. The core duty of knights was warfare. They were the most elite and formidable troops on the battlefields of medieval Europe. Unlike feudal states in the East, the nobility of medieval Europe generally revered martial prowess, believing that only by fighting for dignity and honor on the battlefield could the nobility's high status be truly demonstrated. Thus, major nobles such as kings, dukes, and counts would personally take to the battlefield to fight the enemy, charging alongside ordinary knights. The equipment of knights evolved throughout the Middle Ages, from early chainmail to later plate armor, with protective capabilities growing increasingly stronger. In the 11th century, knights primarily wore chainmail, woven from thousands of small iron rings, weighing approximately 15–20 kilograms, which effectively resisted slashing attacks from swords but offered limited protection against spear thrusts. After the 14th century, plate armor became widespread. This type of armor was crafted from solid iron plates, covering the entire body, with a weight of up to 30–40 kilograms, yet it provided exceptional protection, capable of withstanding attacks from spears, arrows, and even early firearms. The primary weapons of knights included lances, longswords, shields, battle axes, and maces. The lance was the knight's main weapon, reaching lengths of 3–4 meters, with a sharp tip used to pierce enemies during mounted charges. The longsword served as a close combat weapon, featuring a broad blade and weighing about 152 kilograms, suitable for both slashing and thrusting. Shields were typically round or kite-shaped, made of wood and metal, and used to defend against enemy attacks. The tactics of knights primarily revolve around mounted charges. In battle, knights would form dense square formations, wield lances, and charge toward the enemy on horseback, using the impact force of their war horses and the penetrating power of their lances to breach enemy lines. This tactic was highly effective in the early Middle Ages because infantry units at the time lacked effective countermeasures and were often overwhelmed by knightly charges. However, knightly tactics also had significant weaknesses. Due to their heavy armor, knights who fell from their horses struggled to quickly stand up, making them easy targets for the enemy. Additionally, knightly units had poor mobility and found it difficult to leverage their advantages in complex terrain, such as mountains or forests. Thus, during the 100 Years' War, English longbowmen repeatedly defeated French knightly forces by exploiting terrain advantages. In medieval Europe, it was common for nobles to personally take to the battlefield, which stood in stark contrast to the practice in Eastern feudal states, where nobles lived in comfort while commoners served in the military. In Eastern ideology, the nobility's prestige was reflected in holding power over life and death and enslaving others, whereas in the values of European nobility, prestige was embodied in fighting for honor and facing death with equanimity. The 100 Years' War between England and France, 1337–145–3, is a concentrated reflection of these values. In this war that lasted for 116 years, nobles from both sides actively participated in the fighting, with even kings personally leading charges into battle. For example, during the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, King John II of France took to the battlefield alongside his two sons, only to be captured by the English forces. To ransom the king, the French government paid an enormous sum, which became a heavy burden on the nation's finances. In the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the French side suffered over 4,000 casualties, including more than 1,500 nobles, ranging from ordinary knights to high-ranking nobles such as counts and dukes. This would be akin to modern-day governors or provincial leaders taking their families to the front lines and sacrificing their lives for their country, a level of bravery that is astonishing. Meanwhile, King Edward III of England also led his 16-year-old son, Edward the Black Prince, into battle, creating the legendary tale of father and son fighting side by side. This phenomenon of nobles personally engaging in combat not only boosted the morale of the armies but also made the knightly forces more formidable, as noble knights fought fiercely to uphold their honor and family dignity, never retreating. However, it also led to significant casualties among the nobility, causing many ancient noble families to decline or even become extinct. If feudal warfare was the knight's primary duty, then the Crusades were their religious mission. In 1096, responding to Pope Urban II's call, European knights formed the Crusaders and launched a nearly 200-year-long campaign under the banner of reclaiming the Holy Land of Jerusalem and combating infidels. The essence of the Crusades was a combination of religious fervor, territorial expansion, and wealth plunder. For the knights, participating in the Crusades not only offered religious redemption. The Pope promised that all knights who joined would have their sins absolved, allowing them direct entry into heaven after death, but also the prospect of wealth and land. Jerusalem and its surrounding regions were prosperous and rich, filled with treasures such as gold, silk, and spices. The knights hoped to plunder these riches through war and expand their territories. During the Crusades, the knights displayed extreme fanaticism and brutality. On July 15, 1099, after capturing Jerusalem, the Crusaders carried out a three-day massacre. Muslims and Jews in the city, regardless of age or gender, were brutally slaughtered. The streets were stained with blood, mosques and synagogues were burned down, and countless precious artifacts were looted. It was recorded that Jerusalem at the time was littered with corpses, reeking of decay, with not a single clean path to tread. 1204, during the Fourth Crusade in 1204, the knights even turned their spears around and captured Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which was also a Christian nation. They burned, killed, and looted in the city, destroying a large number of artistic treasures and historical sites, and plundered the wealth of the Byzantine Empire. This catastrophe left the Byzantine Empire unable to recover, leading to its decline, and ultimately causing a complete split between the Eastern Orthodox and Catholic churches. Of course, the Crusades also brought some positive impacts. They promoted cultural exchanges between East and West, as European knights brought back items such as silk, spices, compasses, and gunpowder from the East, driving economic development and technological progress in Europe. At the same time, the Crusades broadened the horizons of European knights, exposing them to more advanced military technologies and cultural concepts, which had a certain influence on the development of the knightly system. However, overall, the Crusades brought immense disaster to the Eastern world and exposed the barbaric and plundering aspects of chivalry. After the First Crusade, a series of knightly orders emerged to consolidate territories in the East and protect the safety of pilgrims. These orders were both religious and military organizations, with members taking vows of lifelong poverty, chastity, and obedience, relying on religious faith as their spiritual pillar and military struggle as their primary means. Among them, the most famous were the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights Templar, and the Teutonic Order, collectively known as the Three Great Orders. The predecessor of the Knights Hospitaller was the 1048 founded Hospital of St. John, located in Jerusalem, which provided medical assistance to poor and sick Christians traveling to the Holy Land for pilgrimage 1099. After the Crusaders captured Jerusalem, the hospital received substantial land donations and gradually grew in strength. Under the direction of the Pope, this medical assistance group gradually transformed into a military organization. In 1113, it officially broke away from local political jurisdiction and became a military order directly subordinate to the Pope, with the full name Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem. The members of the Hospitaller Order wore black or red robes, with a white cross featuring a split top, commonly known as the Maltese Cross, worn on their chests, which became the symbol of the order. Unlike other knightly orders, the Hospitallers never abandoned their mission of medical assistance. They established numerous hospitals in the East, providing treatment not only for knights and pilgrims but also for local civilians. At the same time, they undertook military tasks such as defending the Holy Land, combating pirates, and ensuring the safety of pilgrims. After the loss of the Holy Land, the Hospitaller Order relocated first to Cyprus and then to Rhodes, settling on the island of Malta in 1530. On Malta, the order continued its mission of fighting pirates, repeatedly defeating the fleets of the Ottoman Empire and safeguarding the security of the Western Mediterranean. In 1798, Napoleon led French forces to capture Malta, forcing the Hospitaller Order to disband, with its members scattered across Europe. Among the three major knightly orders, the Hospitallers are regarded as the most positive and longest-lasting. They adhered to the mission of helping others and defending the faith, and their bravery and compassion in war earned them widespread respect. Today, the Hospitaller Order continues to exist under the name of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, serving as an international organization with United Nations observer status and continuing its work in medical assistance, charity, and public welfare activities. The Knights Templar was founded in 1118 by French Knight Hugues de Payens and 8 companions. Initially, its main duty was to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, ensuring their safety from bandits and infidels along the way. Since the order's headquarters were located next to the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, it became known as the Knights Templar. In 1128, the Knights Templar received formal papal approval, becoming a military organization directly under the authority of the Pope, enjoying privileges such as tax exemption and immunity from local jurisdiction. Members of the order wore white mantles adorned with a red cross on the chest, and their banner was black and white, symbolizing brotherly love for Christians and ruthless cruelty toward enemies. The Knights Templar were renowned for their bravery in battle, achieving numerous military successes during the Crusades and becoming a key military force in the Christian East. Due to their valor, nobles and churches across Europe donated lands, wealth, and resources to the order, rapidly expanding its power. At its peak, the Knights Templar possessed vast lands and wealth, establishing numerous castles, churches, and estates throughout Europe. They even pioneered early banking services, providing pilgrims with fund safekeeping and currency exchange, as well as lending money at high interest rates to kings and nobles, making them one of the wealthiest organizations in Europe. However, immense wealth also bred corruption and decay. Some high-ranking members of the order became obsessed with money and power, abused their privileges, and committed misdeeds, sparking discontent across European nations. 13 By the end of the 13th century, the Crusaders had lost all their territories in the East, forcing the Knights Templar to return to Europe. Their military value had vanished, and their vast wealth became a target coveted by kings across the continent. 1307 October 13. King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of all Knights Templar members in France, accusing them of heresy, idolatry, homosexuality, and other charges. Subsequently, other European nations followed suit, suppressing the order. 1312. Pope Clement V formally ordered the dissolution of the Knights Templar. 544 knights were sentenced to death by burning by the Catholic Inquisition, including many high-ranking figures such as Grand Master Jacques de Molay. The rise and fall of the Knights Templar is a legendary tale in medieval history. They transformed from heroes protecting pilgrims into victims of political persecution, their fate marked by conspiracy and betrayal. Today, legends about the Knights Templar continue to circulate widely. Some claim they hid immense treasures, while others believe they possessed secret religious knowledge, adding a profound layer of mystery to the order. The origins of the Teutonic Order are similar to those of the Knights Hospitaller. Its predecessor was a hospital established in Jerusalem in 1190 by German merchants to care for sick German pilgrims. 1191. With papal approval, this hospital transformed into a military order, fully known as the Teutonic Order. Teutonic was the medieval European term for Germans. Unlike the Knights Hospitaller and the Knights Templar, the Teutonic Order was primarily composed of Germans, and its activities were mainly concentrated in Eastern Europe and the Baltic region. In the Holy Land of the East, the Teutonic Order had limited influence and achieved no significant military victories. 1226. Duke Conrad of Poland invited the Teutonic Order to Poland to help him fight against the pagan Prussians. The Teutonic Order seized this opportunity to enter the Baltic region and began a large-scale expansion. 1237. The Teutonic Order absorbed the Livonian Order, another Germanic order, greatly enhancing its strength. 14th century marked the peak of the Teutonic Order. In the name of the Pope and the German Emperor, they launched a series of wars in the Baltic region, conquering indigenous peoples in areas such as Prussia and Lithuania, and established a vast order state. With Marienburg as its capital, this state possessed a powerful military and a well-developed administrative system, becoming the dominant power in the Baltic region. However, the expansion of the Teutonic Order raised vigilance among neighboring countries. In 1410, at the Battle of Grunwald-Tannenberg, the Teutonic Order suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of the combined forces of Poland and Lithuania, incurring heavy losses. This battle marked a turning point in the decline of the Teutonic Order, as its military power was severely crippled and its territories were significantly reduced. Thereafter, the influence of the Teutonic Order continued to wane, gradually becoming a vassal state of Poland. In 1525, Grand Master Albert von Brandenburg announced his break from Catholicism, embraced Lutheranism, and transformed the order's state into the secular Duchy of Prussia. From then on, the Teutonic Order as a religious military organization officially ceased to exist, and its historical mission came to an end. The expansion of the Teutonic Order had a profound impact on the history of the Baltic region. It promoted the German eastward expansion, Drang nach Osten, facilitated the Christianization and Germanization of the Prussian territories, and laid the foundation for the later rise of the Kingdom of Prussia. Beyond warfare and religious activities, the daily lives of knights were rich and varied. They were not only warriors on the battlefield but also nobles in the court, and their lifestyle was filled with both ceremonial grandeur and the common touch of ordinary life. Hunting was one of the favorite pastimes of medieval knights and also an important form of military training. Major lords who held fiefs typically established dedicated hunting grounds within their domains, stocking them with game such as deer, wild boar, and hares. During peacetime, knights would regularly organize hunting expeditions, bringing along hounds, bows and arrows, spears, and other tools to pursue game in the forests. Hunting not only provided knights with fresh meat, but also honed their horsemanship, archery skills, and reflexes. In the process of chasing prey, knights needed to skillfully control their war horses and accurately wield their weapons, which shared similarities with combat on the battlefield. Furthermore, hunting served as an important social occasion for knights, where they could exchange martial skills, discuss current affairs, and strengthen bonds with one another. However, medieval hunting was governed by strict regulations. Common peasants were forbidden from hunting in the nobles' hunting grounds, under penalty of severe punishment. Moreover, the types of game that could be hunted were stratified by social rank. Large game like deer and wild boar were reserved for the nobility, while commoners were only permitted to hunt small game such as hares and birds. Knights were passionate about hosting feasts, which served as an important means for them to display their wealth and strengthen social bonds. Feasts were typically held in the great halls of castles, inviting relatives, friends, other nobles, and fellow knights to attend. The banquet dishes were exceptionally lavish, featuring meats such as roasted wild boar, venison, chicken, and fish, along with bread, vegetables, fruits, and cheese. Additionally, the feasts offered copious amounts of wine, beer, and mead, allowing guests to drink to their heart's content. Although the medieval church opposed gluttony and drunkenness, knights often turned a deaf ear to its admonitions. Because they could be sent to the battlefield to meet their demise at any moment, they were more inclined to seize the day and enjoy life in the present. Moreover, warfare demanded immense physical stamina, so knights typically had voracious appetites. Literary works frequently depict knights feasting heartily, such as dragging an entire pig's hind leg on a shield and carving it with a sword, leaving only bones in no time. Feasts were not only a banquet of delicacies, but also a showcase of culture. During these gatherings, minstrels would sing heroic epics and love ballads, jugglers would perform acrobatics and magic tricks, and knights would engage in activities like poetry recitations and musical performances. These activities not only enriched the feast, but also disseminated knightly culture and the spirit of romanticism. Tournaments were the most important military training activity for knights, and one of the most popular public events in medieval Europe. Tournaments originated in 11th century France, initially as spontaneous contests among knights to hone their martial skills, later evolving into organized and regulated formal events. The main event of a tournament was jousting, also known as French combat. During the competition, two knights, mounted on war horses and armed with lances, charged toward each other, attempting to unhorse their opponent with their lance. In addition to jousting, there were also foot combat, team battles, and other diverse forms of competition. 13th century. Tournaments were extremely brutal and savage, almost indistinguishable from actual warfare, with casualties occurring frequently. However, after the 13th century, tournaments gradually became more civilized and ritualized. Before the competition began, knights would participate in grand entrance ceremonies, showcasing their armor, weapons, and banners. During the event, Specialized referees oversaw the proceedings, enforcing strict rules that prohibited the use of lethal weapons, thereby reducing the occurrence of injuries and fatalities. Knights were enthusiastic about participating in tournaments for two main reasons. First, for honor. Knights who performed well in the competitions would win the cheers and praise of the audience, becoming heroes admired by all. Second, for love, tournaments were gatherings for noblewomen, and knights hoped to win their favor by showcasing their strength and courage. Some knights would wear portraits or letters from their lovers on their armor or fashion their lover's sleeve into a banner to cheer themselves on during the matches. Noblewomen were passionate spectators of the tournaments, cheering for the knights they supported and presenting the victorious knights with gloves, ribbons, and other tokens to express their admiration. This heroes paired with beauties scenario became an important theme in medieval romantic literature. Chivalry is the core of the knightly system and an essential component of medieval European culture. It was not a rigid doctrine, but evolved and enriched over the course of history, ultimately forming a value system that included bravery, loyalty, integrity, generosity, humility, and respect for women. Courtly love, in turn, was the specific manifestation of chivalry in the realm of romance, profoundly influencing Western concepts of love and social etiquette. The core tenets of chivalry can be summarized as follows. Knights must be brave and fearless, daring to charge into battle, willing to sacrifice their lives to defend their faith, lord, and honor, while remaining absolutely loyal to their lord and king, upholding their oaths and never betraying them. They must adhere to moral principles, being honest and trustworthy, avoiding deception, theft, or murder, and maintaining a generous and helpful demeanor in their interactions, treating the weak with kindness. Despite their noble status, they must not be arrogant, remaining humble before kings, lords, and clergy, and respecting the dignity of common people. They must respect women, protecting their safety and dignity, and in the pursuit of love, maintain loyalty, devotion, and perseverance, never resorting to undignified actions even if they fail to win the other's affection. The formation of chivalry was influenced by Christian doctrine, the traditional customs of Germanic peoples, and the cultures of ancient Greece and Rome. The Christian concepts of universal love and redemption encouraged knights to cultivate moral character and treat others kindly. The Germanic tradition of hero worship inspired knights to uphold bravery and loyalty. The Greco-Roman ideal of virtue motivated knights to pursue integrity and generosity. These elements merged to ultimately form the distinctive spirit of chivalry. Courtly love was a concept and practice of love popular among European nobility from the late 11th century to the 13th century. Closely linked to chivalry, it represented the embodiment of chivalric ideals in the realm of love. At the heart of courtly love was humble love. Knights regarded noblewomen as goddesses, filled with admiration and affection for them. Knights expressed their love through various means, such as writing poetry, singing songs, giving gifts, and even undertaking adventures to prove their courage and loyalty. In courtly love, love was pure and spiritual, unrelated to marriage. Many knights admired married noblewomen, and their love was often platonic, emphasizing spiritual connection rather than physical possession. The rise of courtly love was closely linked to the social context of the time. In medieval Europe, noblewomen, though of relatively low status, enjoyed a certain degree of social space within the court. They were well-educated, proficient in literature, music, and the arts, and became objects of admiration for knights. By pursuing noblewomen, knights could not only find fulfillment in love, but also enhance their social status and reputation. Courtly love had a profound impact on Western culture. It broke away from the traditions of political marriages and exchanges of interests, prevalent in early medieval marriages, emphasizing the purity and spirituality of love, and pioneered the Western tradition of romantic love. At the same time, courtly love also promoted the development of literature, music, and the arts. Numerous poems and legends depicting the love between knights and noblewomen emerged, such as the Song of Roland and Tristan and Isolde Asterisk, which became classics of medieval literature. Additionally, courtly love contributed to the development of Western social etiquette. In their pursuit of women, knights emphasized courtesy and grace, gradually forming a complete set of social etiquette, such as bowing and shaking hands when meeting, maintaining a humble attitude in conversation, and adhering to dining etiquette. These customs later spread throughout Western society, becoming an important part of Western civilization. In the 17th century, with the development of capitalism and innovations in military technology, the knightly system gradually declined and eventually faded from the historical stage. However, chivalry, as a cultural gene, became deeply embedded in the fabric of Western civilization, exerting a profound influence on later generations. The decline of the knightly system was due to multiple factors. The knightly system was a product of feudalism, and with the rise of capitalism, the feudal land ownership system was gradually dismantled. The rights and obligations between lords and vassals collapsed. The economic status of the nobility declined, making it difficult to sustain the high costs of maintaining knightly forces, and the knightly system lost its economic foundation for survival. After the 15th century, firearms such as guns and cannons became widespread, fundamentally changing the nature of warfare. Knights' armor offered limited protection against firearms, and their charging tactics lost their effectiveness. Meanwhile, the emergence of new infantry tactics eliminated the advantages of knightly forces. Medieval wars were primarily small-scale conflicts between feudal lords, while modern wars were large-scale conflicts between nations, requiring large standing armies rather than temporarily conscripted knightly forces. The combat effectiveness of standing armies far surpassed that of knightly forces. Although the institution of chivalry has faded, its historical legacy continues to influence the world today. The core values of chivalry, bravery, loyalty, integrity, and respect for women, have become fundamental principles in Western society, still revered as moral standards and codes of conduct in modern times. Knightly culture was a vital component of medieval European culture, profoundly impacting later literature, art, film, and other fields, with elements like knights, castles, dragons, and magic remaining popular themes. The etiquette norms developed by knights in court life and social activities formed the basis of Western social etiquette, emphasizing respect for others, grace, and politeness, which continue to shape interpersonal interactions in Western society. The concept of respect for women in chivalry broke the traditional notion that women were mere appendages to men, laying the ideological groundwork for the advancement of women's status in later generations. Medieval knights were a complex and contradictory group. They were warriors on the battlefield, fighting fiercely for honor and faith, yet also plunderers who brought immense suffering to the East during the Crusades. They upheld feudal order while also serving as bearers of cultural and spiritual values. Their stories are filled with the clash of iron and fire, the intertwining of faith and desire, and the coexistence of romance and brutality. As the flower of the era in the Middle Ages, The institution of chivalry witnessed Europe's transition from a slave-based civilization to a feudal one, as well as the zenith and decline of feudal civilization. Its rise was an inevitable outcome of feudal order and military needs, while its decline followed the natural course of historical development. Regardless, knights left an indelible mark on European history with their bravery, loyalty, and faith, and their legendary tales continue to be celebrated to this day.